So we're super excited to be here with Mark Milam of Highland Mortgage, and he's going to give us a bit of insight of some changes that we're seeing in the market. Mark, thanks so much for being on with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I know there's a lot of new information kind of coming to light concerning specifically condos and
hmm
insurance, and it can be a bit confusing, I feel, just because it's
hmm
new and kind of alarming in a way. So
hmm
do you feel like you could kind of give us an overview of what's going on and how that's affecting our buyers and sellers right now?
Sure. Absolutely. So there are these entities out there that most people have heard of called Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And these two entities essentially set forth the underwriting guidelines for the vast majority of purchases in the United States. And when you get to condominiums, things get a little trickier because you're talking about a building with a whole bunch of units in it. And if
Mhm.
one or two people in that building start doing things in a way that doesn't work well, then it could impact all the other people. It's a little more sensitive than, say, a single family detached residence. So
Mhm.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which have these underwriting guidelines, they set forth really specific guidance around insurance as it pertains to condominiums. And they're really not talking about the borrowers or the buyer's insurance. What they're talking about is the HOA's insurance, this master insurance policy that covers the entire building, everything from the rooftop all the way to the ground. And particularly what seems to be happening here in the Atlanta area, but it's not exclusive to Atlanta, it's also happening in other areas of the country, is that as the price of insurance has gone up and maybe claims have started to go up a little bit, especially in older buildings, the way that HOAs have chosen to combat this increase in insurance is by raising certain deductibles. And the one deductible that seems to be coming up is water damage. And when we
Mm.
talk about water damage, we're not talking about flood, we're talking about ruptured pipes inside of buildings. So, water pipes inside of buildings that might rupture and flood a unit and an adjacent unit or maybe an adjacent floor. And so what's happening is in an effort to keep premiums down, in an effort to keep costs down to the HOA, we're raising deductibles, or HOAs are raising deductibles on water damage insurance within this master policy. And that is running them afoul of a Fannie Mae guideline that really hasn't ever changed. It's always been this specific guideline. And it's a
Mhm.
calculation that has to be done. And there's a couple of different ways to fit in the bucket. But ultimately, the way most insurance is written for condos, not all, but the way that most is written, it's now we're now finding that these deductibles are eclipsing the Fannie Mae limit, and it's causing these buildings to fall from being approved to being ineligible for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac financing. That's impacting a lot of home purchasers.
Mm. Okay, wow, man. So, what does this mean, I guess, for people that are owning condos right now, or maybe
Mhm.
you're considering selling in the near future?
Yeah, great question. And it's hard for someone who's not directly being impacted by this problem to really want to dive into it because it's not super exciting, right? It's insurance and
Right.
it's mortgage. And if I don't have to sell, then I'd rather just keep my HOA dues as low as possible. The
Mhm.
problem starts there, though, that if you're not paying attention to it and maybe the HOA is acting in one particular direction and not aware of what they're doing, suddenly it could start impacting your ability to market and sell your property because of the type of financing that won't be available to potential purchasers who would want to buy your unit. So,
Mm.
really, what you could do, either if you're looking to eventually sell, or even just, obviously you should care about the value of your property, is check in with your HOA if you're a potential seller. Hey, what are we doing as it pertains to water damage deductibles within our policy? Have those been raised recently? Have they been raised substantially? Are they 25,000, 50,000 per unit? Or, and this is where it gets really, really granular. Hang with me, Gabby. Or are the deductibles not per unit? Maybe they're per occurrence. And if they're per occurrence, that's a much easier nut to crack. It's where we're seeing the trouble is in the per unit water damage deductible. But what I would encourage anybody in that situation to do is ask your HOA for a copy of the master insurance policy and then send it to a real estate agent or a lender that you trust, someone who's aware of what's happening with condominiums, especially here in Atlanta. We're seeing a good bit of this within the Atlanta market. And and there's some agents that are not aware of it. They're not having webinars and classes like you guys are. And then
Mhm.
there's some that are aware of it. So I would definitely find that trusted real estate advisor that is in the know on this particular problem, send them a copy of the certificate, and then we can help you guys check that down and make sure that the building is A-OK for conforming conventional financing.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Just
Yep.
like educating yourself and having those resources of people that are in the market daily, I just feel like it's so important, both from a
Mhm.
realtor perspective and from a lender perspective as well.
Right.
Definitely. And
Exactly.
then for buyers that are maybe really have their heart set on getting a condo soon, should they tread lightly? What do you think the best practice would be for them right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a dynamic question because certain buildings that, like, I went back and looked at a particular building. I got a certificate of insurance over the weekend that does not meet agency Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines. And I went back because I know we've closed a transaction in there. And I went back and checked this time last year. And sure enough, this time last year, the water damage deductible was $10,000 per unit. The certificate I was sent this weekend is $25,000 per unit. And that is the dividing line between being approved and being ineligible. So if
Mm.
you're a buyer and you're out there looking, really the data is evolving on a per day, sometimes per hour basis in terms of how these HOAs are dealing with the problem. So always, 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 first of all, first step is make sure you're working with someone that's aware of the issue, right? That's aware of what's happening with condominiums as it pertains to master insurance. Start there. And then that individual will surely be connected with great lenders or great resources to get that master policy, have it analyzed, and be sure that you're going in and making an offer on a condominium where you're going to be able to close, right? You're going to have a puncher's chance of being able to close because the insurance is in line with those agency guides. That's always the best bet. It's tough to do that because when you're out there looking at homes, the last thing you want to think about is a master insurance policy, right? You're in love with the kitchen and the location and the view and all of it. That's what you want to think about and focus on. But what you don't want to do is get so far ahead of yourself there and find out that this particular building now is really ineligible for the best, most aggressive financing terms out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I know we talk a lot too about the importance of using a local lender. Do you feel like having that leverage is really important with this new issue?
Boy, do I. Yeah. And it's because, a lot of areas of the country are not experiencing the same issues that we're experiencing here in Atlanta. Some are. Louisiana, we've gotten word. So we're a direct Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac lender. So when we want to get our information, our data, we go right to the source. We're not going through a third party. And even on our calls with Fannie and Freddie, they're telling us they're seeing similar issues in Louisiana. There's a couple of
Mm.
other issues out west where they're starting to see these HOAs jack up these water damage deductible per unit deductibles, and it's causing these buildings to fall ineligible. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's always important to get someone there on the ground. We're headquartered right here in Midtown Atlanta. So condo lending is a huge part of what we do. It has to be.
Absolutely.
So we have to be well versed on this kind of stuff, or that's about a third of our book of business.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, that's great. I feel like this information is so helpful. I know you've come and spoke with our office. I just feel really well equipped, and I know our team does as well. So I'm really grateful for your time. Do you want to leave us with one last nugget before we wrap up?
Sure. So I will mention this. So when you close a loan for Fannie Mae, and I only say this because you hear of certain lenders saying, hey, this isn't a big problem. And there are some lenders out there that are making too much of this and we can get it done. And even sometimes you'll get a note from an agent that says, hey, so-and-so just closed a loan in there and that wasn't a problem. Whenever you go to close a mortgage as a lender, there aren't bells and whistles and alarms that are going to go off if you close a loan that has a defect. It doesn't mean that necessarily that what you did was right. It just means there's not going to be any immediate impact from it. Those mortgages wind up eventually getting sold to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, but that might happen anywhere from a week to 6 months down the road. And even then, only about 10 to 15% of those loans that are sold to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac get audited. So it's sort of like driving 100 miles an hour on I-20 if you're closing a loan that has a defect. You may or may not get caught. You might just get there earlier. But if you do it enough, if you drive 100 miles an hour on I-20 enough, you will eventually have an accident or get caught. And that's exactly what's happening. We want to make sure that we're closing compliant loans that are saleable to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. But the real point, the key point is we want to make sure we're advocating for our clients, right? We don't want to get them in a building where all of a sudden they're going to realize they're going to have a difficult time ever marketing or selling this property because there's an issue with the insurance, right? It's our job to make sure that the client remains protected in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, thank you so much, Mark. I'm so grateful for your time and your expertise. Definitely.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.